Okay, I'm back with even more opinions about this crazy ass Karen Read trial. So here's a couple things. And a lot of this is going to be Jen McCabe focused because I had a chance to watch some of her testimony today. I also started listening. One of you, thank you very much. You told me to listen to this podcast called The 13th Juror by Brandy Churchwell. And it's spectacular. I've only listened to, I think, 2 episodes so far. And I've got like 4 more pages of notes. She's fantastic. Thank you to the person who commented. I mistakenly in my last video said Mark McCabe instead of Matt McCabe. His name is Matt McCabe. So thank you. All of you have been coming to the comments and keeping me on the up and up. This is all very new to me, and I'm piecing together what I'm seeing in other people's videos, what I'm learning on the news, what I'm researching myself. And the stories keep changing. And the timelines keep shifting, and this statement says one thing and that statement says another thing. So it is so convoluted, I can't even keep it all straight. But the one common thread is that this Jen McCabe is a feisty little bitch. This is going to be the symbol for her for going forward. Anyway, so here's what I know now. So we've been talking a lot about butt dials. And the first thing I discovered today from the testimonies, it sounds like there were about 10 calls that she deleted out of her call log. But 6 of them came between 12:40 and 12:50 in the morning. Now, you remember in previous videos, we talked about all of the different text messages that she'd been sending with John O'Keefe. Are you here? Are you here? Park behind me. Where are you? Blah, 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 blah. Well, then there's kind of a radio silence. And then at 12:40, these frantic calls start. So in 6 calls in less than 10 minutes, and she claims on the stand that those were like butt dials. But I got to ask the question, have you guys ever had a butt dial? Like, have you ever butt dialed someone, then your phone hangs up when they don't answer, and then your phone redials it? Does her ass cheek have that phone on auto dial or something? Because when I've butt dialed people or people have butt dialed me, guess what happens if you don't answer? It goes to voicemail. So there should have been like a 10-minute voicemail on John's phone where he captured whatever was happening while her phone was in her pocket. So if it was a legit butt dial, it would have gone into his voicemail. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I think. Now, according to various statements, people start leaving this party at 1:30. Higgins is said to have left at 1:30, and for some reason he goes to the police station because he's got some administrative work to do. Now, I have not seen anything that tells us whether or not he was drinking or not. But I got to tell you, if he was, why would he go to the police station after he'd been drinking? Like, I'm in retail and I wouldn't even go into one of my stores if I've been drinking. So it seems a little weird that a drunk cop would go to work, but that's neither. What's more weird is that he'd go in the middle of the night to suddenly have to go do some administrative work. Jen and Matt are reported to have left at 1:30. According to her phone records, she left at 1:37. Okay, then apparently she gets home at around 1:41. Now, here's what's interesting, and I learned this from that 13th Juror podcast, is that she has a phone and a watch that track her steps. So between 1:37 and 1:41, there were no steps because that's when she was in the car driving. But when she got home at 1:44 a.m., her phone and her watch are starting to record steps. And they continue to record steps continuously on and on and on and on and on until 5:31 in the morning. Sounds to me like someone was nervously pacing in their home because they weren't sure what they were a part of. Allegedly. Anyway, at 5:31, that's when she gets back in the car to go with Karen Read and the other gal back over to the house to look for John. What's interesting is that Jen and Matt leave, Higgins leaves. There's also Brian, Jen, Matt, 2 friends of Brian Jr. all leave right around the same time. None of them report to seeing anything, no body on the front lawn. And let's not forget, while Jen McCabe is allegedly nervously pacing in her home all night, she's also sending some texts. So at 2:25, she sends 2 texts to John. At 2:26, apparently she had gone in and deleted a couple of screenshots. I don't know what she had screenshots of, but she went ahead and deleted them. And then at 2:27 was when she reportedly Googled that how long to die in cold statement. All of that happened coincidentally while her watch was counting an awful lot of steps while she was reportedly at home. Now, I'll have to go back and watch Jen McCabe's full testimony, but it it sounds to me like there's a part where she says when they arrived back at the house, at some point she went into the Alberts home because they didn't come out. We've already said that. A cop has a dead body in his front yard. The police are there. The investigators are there. The EMS are there. People are out front trying to give him CPR. And at no time does this pleasant officer of the law come out to see what's going on. That seems a little suspicious. But what's interesting about Jen McCabe's testimony about going in the house is she basically was making a ruckus because she was trying to wake them up. She said, she went in the house. I assume she's a relative, so she probably has a key or she knows where they hide the key. She gets in. She says she kind of storms in. She goes into their room. And the attorney was asking her about the dog because the attorney's like, wait a minute, it's still kind of dark out. There's a snowstorm, so we know it's a little darker than it normally is. There's craziness happening outside. There's all kinds of noise outside, including sirens. But the dog isn't up and looking out the windows and looking out the door. By the way, I looked at a picture of the front of the house and I think I counted 12 different windows and 2 different doors that looked out on the front yard. And it's not like they've got acres and acres and acres of land. There are 12 windows and 12 doors to which you can very easily see across the several yards of the yard to the street. So it's not like there's any shit that's happening in that front yard that they don't know about. It's interesting that there's no Ring camera footage from the entire neighborhood. And it turns out that there is a neighbor across the street. And their Ring camera is pointed in an exact way that they could have captured what was happening. But when they were asked about it, it turns out that that neighbor is also a police officer. And I guess when the investigators went to ask him about his footage, he said something to the effect of, there was no evidentiary proof on the camera. Oh, I get that there was another dead cop on my neighbor's front yard. Yeah, and there was a whole lot of activity happening in front of the house, but not a thing captured on my camera, officer. You can trust me on this. Instead of them saying, well, how about you let us decide that? They're just like, oh, okay, thanks, sir. Have a good day. But I also keep learning more about John O'Keefe's injuries, right? So according to the autopsy, his cause of death was, quote, blunt impact injuries of the head and hypothermia. There was also defensive wounds on the backs of his hands, like he was defending himself. So there was bruises on the backs of his hands. There was a cut on the back of his head. There's rumored that he had a fractured skull, but we also know that there was face contusions, nose bleeding, mouth bleeding, and then the lacerations up and down his arm, which could have been consistent with dog bites or scratches. And the evidence at the scene was really crazy because the first investigators couldn't find any physical evidence. They couldn't find John's shoe and they couldn't find the pieces of the taillight. They had no physical evidence at the scene. However, when the state troopers came back a couple of hours later, magically, there was 30 plus pieces of taillight on the ground and they found John's shoe. Now, it was one of Boston's worst snowstorms in ages. And so they say in that period of time, it could have snowed as many as 6 or maybe close to 12 inches. So how, when you couldn't find any of that evidence earlier, it had snowed more, how could you suddenly find it now? Unless this is magic snow that just brings everything to the surface. I don't know. But I've lived in some pretty snowy climates and you got to wait till that shit melts to find anything that was ever buried in it. This case just keeps getting weirder. I'm going to keep coming back. As long as you keep watching, I'm going to keep coming back until this whole thing is over. And hopefully this gal will be found innocent.